They didn't just rule a country, they ruled continents. They didn't just build palaces, they built empires that dictated the fate of millions. From the snow-capped Alps of Austria to the sun-drenched coasts of the Americas, the Habsburg family was one of the most powerful dynasties in human history. For over 700 years, they controlled the world through marriage manipulation and military might. Their motto, "Let others wage war. You happy Austria, marry," and marry they did, into nearly every royal house in Europe until their bloodlines touched almost every throne. But behind the glittering crowns and the golden empires was a darker tale, one of obsession, war, inbreeding, and eventual collapse. This is not just a history lesson. This is the real-life Game of Thrones, and the Habsburgs were the ultimate players. So sit tight, because once you dive into the world of the Habsburgs, you'll never see royalty the same way again. The Habsburg story begins in the most unexpected way, not in a palace, but in a small Swiss castle. Around the 11th century, a nobleman named Radbot of Klettgau built a fortress near the Aire River and named it Habsburg, Hawk's Castle. That modest stronghold gave its name to one of the greatest ruling families in world history. For the next few centuries, the Habsburgs were regional players, important but not yet dominant. That all changed in 1273, when Rudolf I became king of the Romans, effectively launching the Habsburgs onto the imperial stage. From there, they would not just climb, they would dominate. And the key to their rise wasn't always war. It was strategy and, most importantly, marriage. If the Habsburgs had a superpower, it was knowing when to fight and when to marry. While other dynasties were bleeding armies in the mud, the Habsburgs were infiltrating bloodlines. They married into the Spanish royal family, the Portuguese, the French, the Hungarians, the Bohemians. Their alliances weren't love stories. They were tactical invasions in silk gloves. This is how the Habsburgs came to control an empire where at one point, the sun literally never set. They ruled Austria, Spain, the Netherlands, Hungary, Bohemia, parts of Italy, and massive colonies in the Americas and Asia. They didn't need to conquer the world. They just married it. No one embodied the power of the Habsburgs more than Charles V. Born in 1500, Charles inherited more land than perhaps any monarch in history. Through a web of marriages and inheritances, he became Holy Roman Emperor, King of Spain, Lord of the Netherlands, ruler of parts of Italy, emperor over vast American colonies. That's right, Charles V was simultaneously Emperor of Europe and the New World. He ruled over more territory than any European before him. His armies battled Protestant reformers in Germany, Muslim Ottomans in the East, and indigenous empires in the Americas. But even Charles, the man who ruled half the known world, was not immune to pressure. By 1556, exhausted and ill, he retired, splitting the empire between his brother Ferdinandis, who took the Austrian lands, and his son Philip Tallers, who inherited Spain and its colonies. And with that decision, he divided the Habsburg dynasty, but both branches would remain terrifyingly powerful. The Spanish Habsburgs became the richest rulers on earth. With gold and silver pouring in from Mexico and Peru, they built an empire of immense wealth. But they also fought endless wars, trying to maintain Catholic control over Europe in the face of Protestant rebellion. Philip Tilly, son of Charles V, built the Spanish Armada and declared war on England. He lost. Over time, Spain's endless wars drained the treasury and the people. Despite being the richest monarchy in the world, Spain went bankrupt 4 times in the 1500s and 1600s alone. And then came the most notorious consequence of the Habsburgs' favorite strategy, inbreeding. For centuries, the Habsburgs married cousins, nieces, and uncles to preserve their bloodline and hold onto their empire. But that came at a brutal biological cost. By the 17th century, the Spanish Habsburgs were so inbred that it created genetic disorders and deformities. The most famous was the Habsburg jaw, a massive, protruding lower jaw that disfigured generations of monarchs. The final horror show was Charles II of Spain, born in 1661. He was so severely disabled that he couldn't chew food, couldn't walk properly, and was mentally impaired. He had 42 known cases of incest in his family tree, and unsurprisingly, Charles Succa could produce no hair. When he died in 1700, the Spanish Habsburg line ended, plunging Europe into the War of the Spanish Succession. Meanwhile, the Austrian branch of the family continued ruling the Holy Roman Empire. They shifted their focus eastward, battling the Ottoman Turks and expanding their reach into Hungary, Croatia, and the Balkans. The Austrian Habsburgs gave the world powerful rulers like Maria Theresa, who modernized the empire and gave birth to Marie Antoinette, the ill-fated Queen of France. They also gave us Joseph II, the enlightened despot who tried to reform the empire, but was too ahead of his time. Austria under the Habsburgs was a mix of grandeur and dysfunction, filled with Gothic palaces, glittering balls, and simmering ethnic tensions. But as nationalism rose in the 19th century, the multi-ethnic Habsburg Empire became harder to control. Hungarians wanted independence, Slavs wanted autonomy, Italians wanted unity. The empire became a pressure cooker, and all it took was one spark to blow it up. That spark came on June 20, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo. That event triggered World War I, the bloodiest conflict the world had ever seen. By the end of the war, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had collapsed. In 1918, Emperor Charles I was forced to abdicate. The Habsburg monarchy was dead. After more than 700 years, the family that once owned the world was now exiled, stripped of power, and largely forgotten by history. After their fall, members of the Habsburg family scattered across Europe. Some lived in exile, some in quiet luxury. They were no longer rulers, just remnants of a dynasty that once shaped the world. Their castles were turned into museums, their portraits into historical curiosities. And yet, even in their downfall, they remained influential. In recent years, members of the modern Habsburg family have worked in politics, human rights, and diplomacy. They no longer rule, but their name still echoes through the halls of European history. The Habsburgs didn't conquer the world by force. They conquered it through relationships. Their empire was built on strategy, patience, and cold calculation. But in the end, that same obsession with purity and bloodlines became their undoing. They were brilliant, ruthless, and tragic. Their rise and fall is a reminder that power must evolve or it will collapse, that alliances can be more dangerous than wars, and that empires built on fear and tradition cannot stand against the tides of change and revolution. Imagine your family rising from a castle in the middle of nowhere to ruling most of the planet and then losing it all. Would you hold on? Would you adapt? Or would history forget you too? The Habsburgs didn't just rule Europe, they were Europe. And yet, in the end, even their bloodline couldn't stop the march of time. If this story blew your mind and made you rethink what it means to build a legacy, hit that like button and comment below. Empire of Blood. Make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the most powerful families, lost fortunes, and forgotten empires that shaped our world. Because sometimes the truth behind royalty is stranger and more tragic than any fiction. Until next time, stay curious. Stay sharp. Remember, power is never permanent, not even for those who own the world.